lack of normality is a terrible, terrible risk. Society, we've torn the fabric of society, and all those things are torn. This is a massive risk. I don't know how to evaluate it, but I would not be surprised if the risk of tearing up society how it is constitutes 10 times higher excess death risk than COVID. People die from poverty. People die from desperation. People die from alcoholism. I think if we looked at the statistics and said, how much is alcohol use up? We could easily get a month of excess death.
Okay, that is Dr. Kulvinder Kaur. And his take is, people are dying of things other than COVID. That's for sure. And in fact, the lockdowns are incredibly destructive. And another individual who has made that case is Denis Rancourt, who joins us. Denis, of course, a very well-known researcher. He's a scientist, former professor. He's done work in the civil rights area. Denis, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Mark. Thanks.
Talk about the fact that more people have died last year than this year. This is an interesting stat. I know that you've been beating this drum for quite some time. I mean, you would think that because of the pandemic, on a numerical basis, more people would die as a consequence of the pandemic. And yet when you look at the numbers, it's striking, isn't it, in terms of the numbers?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there is a winter burden death associated to viral respiratory diseases that is about 10% of the total all-cause deaths in a year. And it varies, it can be 8%, 12%, 10%, and so on. And that is just a given. That's been the case for decades and decades, ever since we've been measuring it. And the same has happened this year. In Canada, there is statistically no difference from any other winter of the last decades this time around in terms of total all-cause death. And it's important to specify all-cause death, not deaths assigned to something. You can fake those, you can be mistaken, you can be biased. But you look at all-cause death, there is no difference in Canada this year from previous years, statistically speaking. Absolutely no meaningful difference. Now, that's one thing, but Mark, there's another thing, is that you can't just look at the total. You have to look at all-cause death as a function of time as well. And there is a special phenomenon that has occurred, which is a very sharp, unnatural increase in all-cause death that happened right after the pandemic was declared. And I have concluded in my research that is due to the actual lockdown measures, the provisions that were imposed at that time to clear the hospitals, infect the care homes, lock down the care homes universally, and so on. That actually killed a lot of people. Even though the total is not significantly different from previous years, the action still killed a lot of people itself that would not otherwise have died.
Denis Rancourt joining us on SAUGA 960. Here's a tweet of yours just a few minutes ago, Denis, criminal manipulation and propaganda. Indeed, yes. And you were retweeting something from Kulvinder Kaur, the doctor whom you just heard from a couple of minutes ago. We played his clip. Cases are meaningless. This is what Dr. Kaur said. Cases are meaningless. Cases don't equal infections. Cases drive harmful lockdowns. Cases are a tool for irrational fear. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, absolutely. The whole cases thing is criminal manipulation. It's just incredible because they're using a PCR test, which is known and proven. The way that they've implemented it with too many cycles in the measurement process is detecting pieces of dead virus. Well, anyone has pieces of dead virus, can have pieces of dead virus and not be infected in the clinical sense, and in fact be immune because they previously had that same pathogen in their bodies. So that's what we're detecting. So necessarily, and also there are many false positives because they've ramped up the test so much that in addition to detecting these pieces of dead virus, they're over-detecting them. They're false positives. So it's a complete bogus. The more you test, the more you're going to find in proportion to how much you test. It's that simple. It's scientific. There have been several scientific, hard science articles about this, demonstrating this in detail. So the test is just bogus for this application in the way that it's being used as an instrument of propaganda. It's really bad what's going on in terms of these so-called cases. Even the word cases is a deviation from its medical meaning. A case, traditionally, in medicine means someone is fighting the infection. They're infected. Their metabolism, their immune system is engaged in fighting the infection. It's a threat to them. That's what a case is normally. You have symptoms and you're fighting the infection. The cases here have nothing to do with that. These people are without symptoms and they're detecting basically false positives and garbage in their body. That's it.
Denis Rancourt joining us. I guess some people are going to say, Denis, well, why would they mislead people? And then on the other hand, then you see what happened in the United States, where you had President Trump, who was headed for victory. He really was, on the strength of a powerful economy, a comeback for the United States. And then this hit, this Wuhan virus, if you believe it came out of that Wuhan lab, I don't know. But the point being that it really undermined his campaign, his re-election campaign. The media, of course, used it as an excuse to attack Trump and say it was all his fault. And now, of course, we see a change potentially in who runs the United States, the most powerful country in the world. So you can well ask, I mean, if you want to enter the realm of the conspiratorial, whether or not that had been intended to change things somehow in terms of who is running not only the United States, but the world.
I think it's a fair question because there is no doubt that this COVID-19 thing is predominantly, a propaganda campaign more than anything. There are always viral respiratory diseases. It could have been any one or any combination of one. If you decide to declare a pandemic when you have no real reason to in terms of numbers of deaths, and you decide to have these universal lockdowns and horrible treatment of care homes and so on, if you decide to do all that, you're going to be creating havoc and death. You're going to be able to talk about it in the media. Irrespective of where this particular virus would have come from, this is a Western propaganda phenomenon. It is the Western media that picked this up and ran with it and kept pushing it, taking all the bogus science about cases and so on, and just multiplying it. So when you look at the phenomenon as a whole, it really does look like it was propaganda intended to achieve something. I don't mean that there's no virus. There's always, 10% of total mortality in the winter burden all-cause death. That's a lot, and it's always there. So I'm not saying there's no virus. I'm just saying this was clearly a propaganda campaign.
Was it launched as a way to, for lack of a better word, just gain more control over us, we the people? I mean, was it a tool used? Has it been a tool used to impose the will of the state on more and more people? Do you see that possibility, Denis?
Well, we don't know. We're not attending the board meetings at the highest levels, global levels, national levels, deep state levels. We're not privy to that. But if you look at the result, it seems clear that many people benefited in a significant way, and the politicians are always happy to go along with something that is low risk to them and can only give them benefit. So they know that the entire media establishment is on side. They know that the population themselves are acting under fear and are going to encourage them on. They know that they can be popular. They can appear as a hero. The media is going to be on their side. They're not going to suffer from this. They're only going to gain from it. And in fact, they're going to be criticized as being irresponsible if they don't behave in a dramatic way. So the politicians will go along with it. So I think it's easy to imagine that at the top level, if you control the media, and the media is controlled. Let's face it, the mainstream media in the West is acting under the direction of powerful influences, including the CIA. This is well established, been shown many times. If you control the media in this way, and you can launch a big global campaign like this, you're going to drag a lot of people along with you, including even independent, sovereign states like Russia and China, who feel that they have to have a vaccine in order to prevent the vaccine border real economic disaster that is caused if the West decides to shut them out, have vaccine passports, and not allow any trade with their competing blocs, which is Eurasia, Russia, China. So they have to go along because of the strength of this propaganda campaign. But overall, this is a Western propaganda campaign, no doubt about it in my mind.
We've seen the media go after these organizers of the rallies that we've seen. We've seen rally after rally, week after week. The media has attacked these people as essentially crazy, saying, well, they're anti-maskers. Well, I think they're for mask choice. I think they say, like, if you want to wear a mask, be my guest, but just don't force me under penalty of a fine to have to wear something on my face when I don't want to, especially outside. I mean, to me, it's just unconscionable. I mean, we're not exactly there yet, but one wonders how far this is going to go. How do you feel that...
You know, Mark, the same is true of vaccines. If a vaccine is effective and you get it as an individual, you're protected, period. That's all there is to it. It's either effective or it's not. You're protected as the individual because you decided to have the vaccine, and that's all there is to it. This whole immunity, mass immunity, herd immunity concept was invented by the vaccine industry in order to convince us to have universal vaccine programs. Because the idea is if you have enough people who are immune, it won't propagate as quickly, and you'll save some of the pockets that were never infected to start with. But that is a twisted concept, because it should be, the state should not be allowed to invade your body with anything. And if the vaccine's effective, fine. You, as an individual, you can make an informed choice to either have it or not, and then you'll be protected. That's how it should be. Not to mention that natural immunity does a darn good job. We've been living with these viral respiratory diseases for thousands of years, animals for billions of years. We've been co-evolving with them. They're in our bodies. There's dozens and dozens of different varieties, and they're always mutating. They're right there with us. They're part of the ecology of our bodies in terms of microbes and viruses. So this is all very natural stuff, and all of a sudden they want us to believe that things have changed to the point that now, for survival of our human species, we need to be vaccinated every single winter for these diseases that have been with us forever. It's crazy.
Denis, how do people support the great work you're doing?
Just read my work. If you're interested, I put a lot of work into writing very thorough scientific articles that I try to make as accessible as I can, and recently I've been putting them all on a site that's called ResearchGate, which is used by scientists and engineers and so on. And my articles have been read hundreds of thousands of times, and they're having influence in that milieu. So get in there and find out, learn about this stuff, and figure out for yourself what's happening here.
Great advice. Denis Rancourt, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure, Mark.
Denis Rancourt is a researcher. He's done great work for the Ontario Civil Liberties Association. He's a scientist. He's a professor and smart guy. Denis Rancourt.